Well, in some senses, I think I share the relief of the Conservative Party and the country as a whole. I was very worried that Boris Johnson might hole himself up in Downing Street and literally have to be dragged out of there by a policeman after he was fired by the Queen. So, you know, his bowing to the inevitable, to reality in a way, and deciding that it was really game over for him, I think, you know, is the best thing he could have done. I think, however, there is a problem with Boris Johnson in the sense that as a caretaker, you're really expected to practically say or do nothing, just keep the ship of state afloat. And Boris Johnson doesn't strike me as a natural candidate for that kind of role. And of course, I think there is actually quite a lot of antipathy, frustration, hostility now within the Conservative Party to Boris Johnson, given what he's put them through. And I suspect some of them will want him gone straight away. And to be honest, I think a lot of the public will want to see him gone straight away. You know, they don't want to see him hanging around like a bad smell in Downing Street. I think that Boris Johnson, you know, finally has got it into his head that the game's up and that he will have to go. I think he'd quite like this last, you know, 2 or 3 months as a kind of swan song. He can tour the country, possibly tour the world as a statesman, you know, keep banging on about his support for Vladimir Zelensky, etc. You know, and there'll be a few more pages in, you know, the final chapter of his memoirs, which of course he will be hoping to sell lots of copies of. But I don't think he's going to stick around in Downing Street for that much longer. In some ways, that was one of the most worrying aspects of the last few days, the fact that a leader in a parliamentary democracy somehow interpreted the votes given to his party at an election as a personal mandate, as if he were the president. I think, as I say, that's you know, that's the kind of delusion of a quite narcissistic populist, to be honest. I was really actually quite worried last night about, you know, how long this would go on and whether, in fact, in the end, we were going to have to see, you know, a 96-year-old sovereign, Queen Elizabeth, you know, do Boris Johnson's job for him and relieve him of the premiership. I think that would have been a really, really negative precedent to set, and I'm just glad that, you know, we haven't gone there. I think the last few days have been quite worrying, though, because I think, you know, there was always a sense in which critics of Boris Johnson believed that he could be quite deluded, but I don't think they ever saw him as completely deranged. I think that was the difference they always drew, the distinction they always drew with Donald Trump in some ways. But I think that distinction began, for some people anyway, to break down over the last 48 hours. I mean, I think there's an extent to which after Partygate, it was the straw that broke the camel's back. But I think there is something particularly noxious about a prime minister appointing someone that he quite clearly knew to be what you might describe as a sex pest, and then, you know, deny all knowledge of that, only to be contradicted by the facts. I think that really was too much for the Conservative Party in Parliament, and probably for the membership as well. They were prepared to forgive him, you know, so much, but I think that was, as far as they were concerned, unforgivable. You know, the fact that Boris Johnson's premiership turned out like this came as absolutely no surprise to anyone who knew him or had followed his career over the years. It was quite clear that this was someone who, yes, may have been a great salesman, but was never going to make a chief executive, who had really no interest in and no talent for governing, and had very little respect for norms and conventions, and in the end, actually very little respect for the truth. People were warned about that, but the Conservative Party was in desperate straits in 2019 and went ahead anyway. Perhaps next time they'll think a little bit more carefully about doing the same.